This conference will now be recorded.
All right, yes. So we had our first study, and I suspect that quite a few of us who are present this evening were not here for that first study a couple of weeks ago. So we might have to go back over some of that, some of the ground we covered. But we were actually looking at this very important and very interesting chapter, Revelation chapter 17, and we spent quite a while going through some of the elements of that chapter. Um, as a matter of fact, I don't even remember exactly where we stopped, but what I'm going to try to do is do a brief review of what I know we covered, the parts that I'm sure of, and then we'll pick up from there and we will continue. And if we have to go back over some things that we already commented on, we will do so. Now, because it's a Bible study, it's not a sermon, I am going to invite us to ask questions. I would encourage us, if we are to have a flow to the study, then we need to make those comments reasonably short. All right, I don't want to curtail our opportunity to express ourselves, but what I know from my experience is that if you're having a study, whoever is leading out will have an idea in mind. You have an endpoint that you want to get to. When it comes to prophecy, there are 50 different ideas on almost every prophecy. That's the truth. And I mean, we could follow a set study, like you could take Daniel and Revelation and go through what Uriah Smith says, or you could go through Unfolding the Revelation by Roy Allen Anderson or by Maxwell, and we could just study what they say. Then we could all get the book and just read. But if we are studying the Bible, what we want to do is explore. But at the same time, whoever is leading the study, you have an idea in mind of something you want to present. So you'll be directing the study in a certain direction. In the midst of this, you will have many different ideas. What I'd like to avoid is for the study to be directed in another direction, because the reason being that it's going to bring nothing but confusion. I'm familiar with prophecy studies, and I know that what happens is that after a while, if people don't see clearly where we're going, your mind just tunes out and you don't receive that benefit. So it might be better for even different people to do a presentation on different evenings. It might be better that way. So I'm for that as well. If there's somebody who believes I have an understanding of this that gives some different insight, then I'm perfectly agreeable. If all of us are agreeable, I'm perfectly agreeable for such a person to say, well, then can I share my presentation next Sabbath or something like that? I'm perfectly agreeable with that. But what I'm saying is that when we are having one person leading out and we are progressing in a certain direction, ask all the questions. But it wouldn't be wise to take the study in another direction to confuse what is being said. All right, so I'm just asking to bear that in mind if we have a comment to make. All right, so all questions are appreciated, comments are also acceptable, but please bear that in mind. All right, so we were studying Revelation 17, and briefly, what we started by pointing out is that in Revelation 17, the focus is the judgment of the woman. In the first few verses, the angel says, come, I will show you the judgment of the woman. So the emphasis of Revelation 17, continuing to Revelation 18, is the judgment of the great prostitute named Babylon. So that's first of all, don't forget that emphasis. The second thing we notice is that a great deal of the chapter is spent talking about the beast that the woman is riding. So even though the emphasis is the judgment of Babylon, we see that she is in a very strong relationship with this beast. She's riding the beast, or she's sitting on the beast. Either the beast is carrying her or she's manipulating the beast. Maybe both things are happening. She's riding the beast. And we pointed out that Revelation 17 is one of those places where we get some very strong insight into the identity and the nature of this beast. It's very important to remember that in Revelation, there are only two beasts. There are not three or four. There are only two beasts. And technically, you can say there's only one beast. And I'll tell you why I say this. Now, we know that in Revelation 13, there are two beasts, that one comes from the sea and the other one comes from the earth. But why I say there's only technically one beast is because the second beast is mentioned only in Revelation 13. When that beast appears elsewhere in the book of Revelation, he is always referred to as a false prophet. He's not referred to as a beast anywhere else. He's referred to as a false prophet. But we know the false prophet and the second beast are the same entity. And we demonstrated this by looking at Revelation 19, where it refers to the false prophet, and it says this is a false prophet that was working miracles in the presence of the beast. And we see that this means it's the same second beast that we saw in Revelation 13. So we established this because we wanted to make the point that everywhere in Revelation that you see mention made of the beast, the beast, the beast, it's always pointing to the first beast. Revelation says the beast. It doesn't say a beast or one of the beasts. It says the beast. Revelation 19, Revelation 17, Revelation 11, Revelation 16, the dragon, the beast, and the false prophet. Always the beast is the first beast, the one that had the 7 heads and 10 horns. There are not two of them. There's only one such beast in the book of Revelation. And it's important to remember this. And I've seen this to be a very important point because many of our brethren, they try to force their own interpretation into the prophecy because they want the prophecy to say a certain thing. They want the prophecy to come to a certain conclusion. So they force their interpretation onto the prophecy, and it requires them to say there is more than one beast in Revelation. And they don't mean the 2-horned beast. They are saying the beast of Revelation 13 with the 7 heads and the 10 horns is different from the beast in Revelation 17 with the 7 heads and the 10 horns, which is really, to put it mildly, this is a ridiculous conclusion. But I'm emphasizing this point because it's important that we bear it in mind and focus on it. There's only one beast in Revelation. Whether Revelation 11, the beast appears there, the beast from the bottomless pit. Revelation 13, Revelation 17, Revelation 19, it's all the same beast. So once you understand this, it helps you to better understand the identity of the beast and also the time period that these chapters in Revelation are focusing on. But as I said, we focused on Revelation 17, and some of the things we saw in chapter 17 are, number one, this beast is a panoramic beast. And what we mean by this is that the beast represents an entity that spans millennia, ages, generations, many thousands of years. The beast is not just in one moment of time. And how do we know it is so? In fact, so that I don't just end up confusing anybody, what I'm going to do is I'm going to share my Bible, and we're going to just refer to the verses as we go along, so that we can just remind ourselves of some of these things. So we go to Revelation 17, and it says in verse 8, and that this verse really gave me a beating for many years. I couldn't make sense out of it. And the beast, verse 8, and the beast that thou sawest was, and is not, and shall ascend out of the bottomless pit and go into perdition. I couldn't understand this was, and is not, and shall ascend. And it goes on to say, verse 10, and there are 7 kings 5 have fallen, one is, and the other is not yet come. And when he cometh, he must continue a short space. And the beast that was and is not, even he is the 8th, and is of the 7th, and goeth into perdition. I've always listened to riddles and tried to solve them from I was a boy. This is the hardest riddle I ever faced in my life. And one of the reasons why I couldn't make head or tail of this riddle is because I had some preconceived ideas in my mind. I was taught a certain way, and I was compelled to make the prophecy fit with my paradigm, and I could not make it fit. That is why there's only one other prophecy in the Bible. I mean, in Daniel and Revelation, there's only one other prophecy that has given me as much of a beating as this one did. And the other prophecy, I didn't spend as much time on it by any means, and that's the prophecy of Daniel 11, the king of the north and the king of the south. I still have not come up with a satisfactory answer to that prophecy, but I never studied it like I studied this prophecy in Revelation 17. I really spent time on this, and I could not make any progress because I had the preconceived ideas in my mind. But once I was able to shed those ideas and open my mind, I began to find an answer that I still, even though all elements are not perfectly in place, I have a much better idea of what I think is happening here. So like I said, this beast is a panorama. In other words, his history covers many ages. And this verse shows us that it's a panorama, because it says in verse 10, there are 7 kings. All right, let me look at the NASB and see what it says. See what it says? It says, it doesn't say there are. It says they are. They are. Not there are. What it means is that it says in verse 9, the 7 heads are 7 mountains on which the woman sits. There are 7 mountains. And the same 7 heads are also 7 kings or 7 kingdoms. Now, if you look at the King James Version, it says, and there are, which could mean that in addition to the 7 heads, which are 7 mountains, there are also 7 kings separate from the 7 heads. Some people interpret it that way. That's why I'm emphasizing the point. It's saying the 7 heads represent 7 mountains, and they also represent 7 kingdoms. So it's not contradictory. It's like, you know, there are some people who say that these 7 heads represent the 7 hills of Rome, that the city of Rome is actually built on 7 literal hills, which I find to be really straining at a knot. It's straining at a point. It's typical of the legalistic approach to the Bible, because this book of Revelation is, in a very extreme way, a book of symbols. Everything is symbolic, almost everything. You can't see 7 mountains and say it means 7 literal mountains. Just like so what? The woman is a literal woman? If the mountains are 7 mountains and the woman is a real woman, and the beast is a real beast, and the horns are real horns, but it's symbols, so it's not 7 literal mountains. The explanation is that it represents 7 kingdoms. A mountain is a great power. Many times in the Old Testament, Israel is called the mountain of the Lord, and Babylon is called that great mountain, or it was the Persian kingdom, thou great mountain. So we take these applications and we apply them to the prophecy. These 7 heads are 7 great powers, 7 great empires. And I use the word empire, as I explained the last time, because an empire is a kingdom which encompasses other kingdoms. There are not many empires left in the world, but there are a few. But an empire is not a kingdom. A kingdom is an individual nation. But an empire is a kingdom that has sub-kingdoms. There are other lesser powers that are subject to this great kingdom. They are governed by this kingdom. So we're looking at an empire. So it says that the 7 heads are 7 empires. on which this woman is sitting. And it says, notice that it says she sits on the 7 heads. It's not just one of the heads she's sitting on. She's sitting on all 7 heads. And five of them have fallen. One is presently existing, and the other has not yet arrived. So this makes us know that the beast is not a beast that exists. It's not a power that exists in one space of time. The beast has passed through 7 heads. 7 great empires have made up this beast. And at one point in time, the beast was this empire. That empire fell, and the beast morphed into the next empire. That one fell, and it morphed into the 3rd empire. When that one fell, it morphed into the 4th empire. And so the beast has been changing identity across the ages. It's one great satanic kingdom, but it keeps changing its identity as the reins of power shift from one empire to another empire. Satan is simply changing the center of his power. So if you think of the 4 kingdoms in Daniel, when Babylon was ruling, who do you think was behind Babylon? It was Satan. It was Satan that established Babylon. I mean, God permitted it. Yes, God sets up kings and takes down kings, but Babylon certainly was not God's nation. God's people at that time was Israel. So who was in charge? Who was the God of these great nations? Babylon, Medo, Persia, Greece, Rome. It was Satan. Satan used all of them in his efforts to destroy God's people. So each of those heads represented, each of those kingdoms represented one head of the beast. So at the time that the angel comes to John in Revelation, he says 5 of them have fallen. One exists and the other has not yet come. So at this point, there's still only one head. There's still only one beast. So, but we are seeing 7 heads, and the reason is God is giving us a panorama. It's like you can look at Mount Rushmore in America, and you see the heads of 4 American presidents. All right, I don't know how many there have been, but they could carve the heads of all the presidents of America on that mountain or on some mountains, and you could look at that mountain and you could say, here is America. But what you're really looking at is not America today. You're looking at the history of America over the past 200-300 years. So it's a panoramic view, and that's what God is giving us in Revelation. So at the moment in Revelation, and at any one point in time, the beast has only one head, not 7, 1. So we are to understand this about the beast. And if we understand this about the beast, we also understand about the woman. If the woman has been sitting upon all 7 heads, then the woman cannot represent the Roman Catholic Church. The woman may include the Roman Catholic Church, but cannot be exclusively the Roman Catholic Church. So what then would be the woman? If the woman was there in the days of Babylon and Medo Persia and Greece and Rome, if the woman represents a great religious power, what then is this woman? And we saw that this woman represents the great historic Babylon that goes right back to the Tower of Babel. This woman represents the great false, just like how the beast represents the great political enemy of God's people through the ages. The woman represents the great religious enemy of God's religion through the ages. And that religion started at Babylon, at the Tower of Babel, when the first Trinity doctrine was established by Nimrod and Semiramis and Tammuz. And it dominated Egypt, Assyria, Babylon, Medo Persia, Greece, Rome, down through the ages. That great false religious system has dominated all of these great powers of the world right through the ages, even until today. Today you find, and in the past few hundred of years, over 1,000 years, that great power has been more or less encapsulated in the Roman Catholic institution. That has been more or less a great religious system that has dominated the power that constitutes the beast. However, I believe that this this Babylon today also encompasses many of the other religious denominations, and because the same characteristics of this Babylon are manifested in many of these denominations. Because I think primarily, one of the things that we learn as Adventists is that Babylon is characterized by a certain doctrine. We again focus on legalism and we fail to look at principles. I learned this from A.T. Jones and it stuck in my mind, and it's really something that I believe very much in. A.T. Jones says, when you look at the Babylon by the river Euphrates, that great Babylon that started way back in the days of Nimrod, there are three great principles to this Nimrod, to this Babylon. And he says, these are the marks of Babylon even until today. And I believe it. There are spiritual principles. Jehovah's Witnesses like to say that they say that Babylon is organized religion. And everybody, of course, is Babylon except Jehovah's Witnesses. And Adventists do the same, all right? But an Adventist say the mark of Babylon is Sunday worship and what have you. And many of us say the mark of Babylon is a Trinity doctrine. We major in minor things. But, I asked one day a Jehovah's Witness came to me and I gave him these 3 points. It was a lady. And and to be honest, when I began to put these points on the lady, she came at me aggressively. When I began to show her these points, she backed up against a wall, and I could literally see her looking left and right and wanting to find a way to escape. And she was eventually glad to leave. But the 3 points, A.T. Jones says, the first thing in Babylon was that they said, let us make us a tower whose height shall reach unto heaven. So we can make a name for ourselves, and lest we be scattered abroad upon the face of the earth. A.T. Jones points out that these are the 3 great principles of Babylon. Number 1, a desire for worldly recognition. Now you tell me which denomination is not seeking for this today. Well, I'm not going to condemn all of them. There are a few that are not, but most of those that I know, the number 1 priority is to be recognized and to be established in the world. And that includes the denomination that I used to belong to. That is the aim. That is what they're after. They will do anything to maintain that position, which is why they all will receive the mark of the beast. They want to make a name for themselves, to become established and well known and recognized. And the second thing is, lest we be scattered abroad upon the face of the earth. The second principle is they want to become centralized. In other words, they want to have their power focused on one central place, whether it is the Vatican or Silver Springs in Maryland or the Jehovah's Witness headquarters in Brooklyn, New York. They centralize, they put everything in the hands of a few men who become God on earth. And they bind themselves in some kind of organization to give themselves some kind of unique mark that makes them special and gives them this elite identity, this elitist identity. They wanted to make a name and not be scattered abroad upon the face of the earth. And they wanted to build a tower whose height shall reach up to heaven. The principle here is they wanted to establish a religion based on their ideas instead of God's principles. And I've always looked at these 3 things as the key hallmarks of Babylon. Well, not always, but for many years, since I read these ideas in A.T. Jones's little book called From Babylon to New Jerusalem. So I believe that this great Babylon that has been riding the beast is the same entity. The principles have been the same, whether you call it the Babylonian religion, or you call it the Medo-Persian religion, Mithraism, or you call it Egyptian sun worship, or you call it Roman Catholic disguised paganism. It's all the same Babylon, built upon the same Babylonian principles. And interestingly, The Roman Catholic Church has said in the handbook for today's Catholic, page 16, that the mystery of the Trinity is the central doctrine of the Catholic faith, and that all her doctrines are based upon that idea of the Trinity. One of the most startling statements you can find. I mean, that is something Adventists should really latch on to, because they like to say Sunday observance is a mark of Catholicism, but the Catholics claim that the doctrine of the Trinity is a central doctrine of their faith. And you can understand, if you go back to Babel and understand how the Trinity began with Nimrod and his wife Semiramis and their son Tammuz, you can see that this is really the foundation of all false religion, and you can understand why somehow in God's overriding sovereignty, the Catholic Church has put it in their literature that it is their central doctrine. Anyway, so the point is that the 7 heads are 7 mountains on which this woman is sitting. So the question comes up, what are these 7 heads? That also is a question that gave me a hard time, because where do you start? You have to start somewhere in order to get to 7. And most people start with Babylon, and I started with Babylon because when you start studying Daniel and Revelation, the first place you get to is Babylon, because in the book of Daniel, Daniel chapter 2 begins with the image, and the head of the image is gold, and it represents Babylon. So of course, we conclude that all prophecy begins with Babylon. But if you start with Babylon and you use the image, you end up with the most you can arrive at is 5 heads, because Babylon, Medo-Persia, Greece, Rome, and if you say Rome is transplanted by the feet of iron and clay, if you want to say it's different, and I don't agree that it's different. I think there are only 4. But if you even say it's different, you end up with 5. And yet the beast has 7 heads. So I find a justification in going back before Babylon. And if you go back further than Babylon, you find that there are 2 great powers that existed before the time of Babylon, which did great harm to God's people. And I believe that is what we are looking for when we are looking for the heads of the beast. We are looking for powers that became really, really great empires, and that Satan used. This is the main point. Satan used these powers to try to destroy God's people. That's the main reason why these powers become important in prophecy. Because if they were just powers that existed, then you'd have to put China in there. You might have to put Russia in there, or maybe India, because China and India are 2 of the largest nations on the planet today. But they don't appear in the prophecies because they are not major persecuting powers. We are looking for powers that Satan used in his efforts to destroy God's people and God's movement. That's why these empires, these 7 heads of the beast, come into the picture. They are Satan's children, Satan's babies, that he calls the beast out of the sea. It's his baby, and each head of this beast represents his kingdom at that point in time. So I believe there's justification for going back beyond Babylon. You see, when you come to the prophecy of Babylon, of Daniel, the prophecies of Daniel, God starts where Daniel is. And Daniel begins with Babylon. Daniel is a prisoner in Babylon. And so God wants to tell him what will happen to your people from this point forward, because Daniel's concern is about his people, the Jews, and their captivity in Babylon. And God starts there. So he tells him about what will happen to the Jews, but God, in his wisdom, gives these prophecies a greater meaning so that they can be applied, and they are more fully applied to the great spiritual Israel that exists at the end of time. He begins where Daniel is, but he gives the prophecies a greater meaning. And many of them can be applied to Daniel's time, but their greater application is to God's people later on, down when they become a spiritual people. So it's logical that God starts with Babylon. But when you come to the book of Revelation, In the book of Revelation, what we see is the conflict through the ages. Not just a conflict beginning with Babylon, not just a conflict beginning with Daniel, but in Revelation, you're looking at the history of the beast right through the ages, which is why God takes us beyond Babylon right back to the very beginning. And you might say, why does God take us back through the ages? Why doesn't he start with Babylon just so we can have continuity? The reason is because Revelation is a book of books. When I say this, I mean it is a book of prophecy to end all prophecy. All the prophecies come together in Revelation. You go to Isaiah, Jeremiah, Daniel, Ezekiel, Micah, Nahum, all of them find their zenith, their meeting place in the book of Revelation. Revelation is the last great prophecy of the Bible. And if you look at Revelation, all the elements of the other prophecies are there. The four horses of Zechariah are in Revelation. Babylon is there. Sodom is there. And all the elements, which is why one of the keys to understanding Revelation is that you must go back to the Old Testament and look for those symbols and try to apply them in a spiritual way. So anyway, I'm just saying that is one of the reasons. That is the reason why, in looking at the book of Revelation and looking at this beast and his heads, I believe we should legitimately go back and start with the kingdom of Egypt, because where did God's people begin? They began with Abraham, but Abraham only had one son, and then he had Isaac, who had two sons, and then Jacob had 12 of them and a daughter, and all of them went down to Egypt. And it was in the very beginning of the nation of Israel, the very beginning, that the nation of Israel tried to destroy them, which is kind of amazing, because you think God doesn't even have a people yet. They're just beginning to develop, and at the very beginning, Satan sets out to destroy them. And Pharaoh makes a decree that they must kill every male child that is born to Israel. So that is Satan's first great attempt to destroy Israel. And why is Satan so set against these people? Because God has chosen them to be his vessel for producing the Messiah. Satan knows that somewhere out of these people will come the one that will crush his head, like was promised in the Garden of Eden, like was promised to Abraham and to Isaac. He knows that a seed is coming that will crush his head. And so he sets out to destroy the male children especially. They were always the target. Even when Herod destroyed those male children, it was the males that he went for, because the Messiah was to be a male. So Satan is trying from the beginning. And you know that this is what Revelation is showing us, because God says in Genesis 3 and verse 15, he says that the seed of the woman will bruise the head of the serpent, but the serpent will bruise his heel. And you go to Revelation 12 and you see the woman about to bring forth the seed. She's about to give birth to a child. And there is a serpent. Satan is standing in front of her to devour the child as soon as it is born. He's setting out to destroy the seed. And we are told that the child is caught up to God and to his throne, and that the serpent does not get to destroy him. But we know Satan bruised his heel. Satan put him to death while he was here. And Satan may be still, in a sense, bruising his heel, because the remnant of the seed is still here. The remaining portion of the body of Christ is still on earth, and Satan goes to make war against them. So in a secondary sense, Satan still has the opportunity to bruise the heel of Christ. The head is gone, but the heel is still here. The body is still here. And the prophecy says that he will make war against the remnant. So the point I'm making is that Revelation is, I think I can see clearly in Revelation that God is bringing all the elements of the ages together in this one book. So I believe that in identifying these 7 heads, it is quite legitimate to go back to Egypt. That was the first head. The second head was the nation of Assyria. And for those who don't know and who might ask, how can we justify Assyria being one of the heads? Well, if you don't know, Babylon captured the Jews, which included the tribe of Benjamin and Levi. So Babylon persecuted 3 of the tribes, and Medo-Persia inherited that, and then Greece did the same, and then Rome did the same. But for those who don't know, Assyria destroyed 10 of those tribes. There are 10 tribes of Israel which they refer to as the lost tribes, because nobody knows where they are or what happened to them. The Assyrians came against them, took them out of their land, carried them away, and they have disappeared. I suppose they are scattered among the nations, but they no longer exist. And it was Assyria that did this. So they did the greatest damage to the tribes of Israel. So definitely they have a place there. And then we know what Babylon did. It took them away captive for 70 years. Medo-Persia inherited that captivity and kept them captive until Cyrus decided to let them free. Cyrus and Artaxerxes. The Greeks persecuted them under Antiochus Epiphanes, offered swine's blood on the altar, and made war against them. And we know what the Romans did. The Romans eventually destroyed the nation of Judah and slaughtered over 1 million Jews and carried the rest away captive to different lands. Plus, persecuted the Christian church mercilessly for centuries. So I regard those as being the 6 heads, first 6 heads. In the time that the angel is speaking to John, he says 5 have fallen: Egypt, Assyria, Babylon, Medo-Persia, Greece. 5 have fallen. 1 is, that is the Roman head. So that is number 6. The other one has not come yet, and when he comes, he must continue a short space. Now, what happens to head number 6? It says that the beast receives a deadly wound. So head number 6, here is my understanding, and my interpretation may not be perfect, but it's the best understanding that I've been able to come up with. Head number 6 is Rome. What happened to the Roman Empire? The Roman Empire was broken up into small pieces. The Roman Empire was broken up into the Heruli, the Vandals, the Ostrogoths, the Suevi, the Normans, the Saxons, whatever. 10 different, we can actually trace 10 different tribes that it was broken up into. So it seemed, when Rome was broken up in about 476 or thereabouts, it seemed that the beast was gone forever. Since the time of Rome, there has never been another empire in that part of the world that has persecuted God's people, that has dominated the world and persecuted God's people like Rome did. There's never been another one. And to all intents and purposes, it seems like the beast is gone. He's dead. The Roman head has received a deadly wound. But notice one of these verses says that the beast, in verse 8, it says, the beast that thou sawest was and is not, and shall ascend out of the bottomless pit. So the beast was and is not. But later on, it says that the beast, when they see the beast that was and is not, and yet is. So there's a sense in which, although the beast is not, the beast yet is. It exists, but it doesn't exist. And what I understand this to mean is that the beast exists in a different form. In other words, the beast is no longer a dominant power controlled by one head. But when you go to the book of Daniel and you look at the 4 beasts and you look at the image, what we see is that there are only 4 kingdoms. From the time of Daniel: Babylon, Medo-Persia, Greece, Rome. The last kingdom to rule the world, the last kingdom in that list is Rome. Rome is to remain until it is given to the burning flame. According to Daniel 7, Rome is to be destroyed at the coming of Jesus when it is given to the burning flame. So Rome does not cease to exist. It is not and yet is, but it has a different form. It appears to be that it is dead because it received this deadly wound. I know for those who are hearing this the first time, it's a bit strange, because I know most of us believe that the beast is the papacy, and the beast that received the deadly wound is the papacy, and I'm giving it an entirely different interpretation. And I know it is a bit of a shock, but really, in trying to make sense of the prophecy, this is how I have to conclude. I can't say it is the papacy, because the papacy was never an empire that dominated the world. These heads of the beast are secular powers. The papacy represents the woman riding the beast. The Roman Catholic power is the woman riding the beast, but it is not the beast. It is not one of the heads of the beast, because even in the book of Daniel, it's represented only as a horn. A horn is just a minor kingdom. A head is an empire. And the papacy is not represented as an empire anywhere in the prophecy. It's either a woman or it is one of the minor horns. All right, so if Rome is head number 6 and the head receives a deadly wound and the wound is healed, what are we to expect to happen? There are several things that God has said about the fourth kingdom that we need to consider. First of all, God says they shall mingle themselves with the seed of men. When he talks about this fourth kingdom in the book of Daniel, I should really be looking at these statements so we can really pin the pictures in our mind instead of me just saying it. Here's what God says in this vision of the image. See what he says in verse 43. And whereas thou sawest iron mixed with miry clay, they shall mingle themselves with the seed of men, but they shall not cleave one to another, even as iron is not mixed with clay. Now this verse is referring to the feet of the image, which were made of iron and clay, iron mixed with clay. Now notice that it was partly iron, and the iron represents Rome. But it was partly clay, which suggests that in the iron kingdom of Rome, there came an element that was much weaker. Dirt became mingled with the iron. So the power of Rome was broken, but it was still Rome, but it was Rome in a broken form. And God says they shall mingle themselves with the seed of men, which means what he's saying is that they will try to unite themselves. But how do they try to unite? They try to unite by mingling themselves into marriage. Once it was said that all the heads of Europe were related by marriage. The king of Spain would give his daughter to get married to the king of England, and he would give his son to be married to the king of the queen of Denmark, and they mingle themselves together in an effort to reunite Europe. They want the European mindset is a mindset of empire. They are hungry for empire, and it's from the days of Charles the Great, through Hitler, through the European Union. That dream of a united Europe remains. It's one landmass, and they are trying to reunite it. But since the days of Rome, nobody has succeeded. And God says they will try, but they shall not cleave one to another, because iron is not mixed with clay. So God says Rome remains, but Rome never reunites completely. This is God's word. But it says there is a sense in which Rome achieves some kind of unity, because there is to be a kind of seventh head, which remains for a short space. Now, in my understanding, I see this seventh head as being the European Union. Now, why do I say the European Union? Most of us understand that the United States is a single country. I who have never been an American, I find the system of government a little difficult to understand. I don't really understand where federal government ends and state government begins. It seems to me that federal government has far more authority than state government, but there are some places and some cases in which state governments overrule federal government. So I don't understand exactly how it works, because I belong to a little country where the government just dominates everywhere. But anyway, America has 52 states, and yet it is one country. This is the ideal that Europe is dreaming about. So they established, first of all, the European Common Market, which has morphed into the European Union. I believe they have 28 members at the moment. There were 29 until England decided to pull out. And it was when I was looking at why England pulled out of the European Union that I recognized that really the European Union is one government. Because all the nations that belong, they are governed by the European Parliament, which operates out of Belgium. And they make laws to control thousands of aspects of life in all the member states. And the authority of the European Union overrides the authority of those local governments in the different states. So it really is one central government that controls all these countries, even though there's some kind of autonomy for each country, but there's a central controlling government. And that's why England pulled out. They were very unhappy that people were representing them in a country somewhere across the sea and telling them what to do, and they are paying all these taxes to this entity when they really have very little say in what is happening there. It's interesting because America was a European colony, an English colony, and they rebelled against England for almost the same exact reason, because they were upset that they were being taxed by England and they were being governed from England, and they had no representative in the British Parliament. And that's one of the reasons why America broke away and became an independent state. And now England is breaking away from the EU for the same reason. So it's kind of ironic. But anyway, this made me recognize that the European Union is really attempting to be a country like America is a country. It's attempting to become the United States of Europe, and to some extent it has succeeded. But God says they shall mingle themselves with the seed of men, but they shall not cleave one to another. In other words, there will be a kind of tenuous, fragile union, but it won't last. It will only appear to be so for a while, but it won't last. So it fits the specifications of the prophecy, because God says the seventh head must remain for a short space. The European Union has been around for half a century, not much more than that, half a century. It doesn't compare to all the other heads of the beast which have lasted for hundreds of years, most of them. One of the shortest was Greece, which lasted about 100 and 200 and something years, I think. I don't remember exactly, but their reigns have been much longer than the EU. And we can all see that from what we see happening, the EU won't be around for much longer. It won't last, because the Lord is coming soon. And secondly, the union is fragile, as the prophecy says. It won't last. They won't cleave. They won't be able to bind themselves one to another for a brief moment. And so it seems for a short time that Rome has found back its identity. It's the same space as Rome. It's the same nations that made up the Roman Empire. It's the same area that it governs, Europe. So it seems like the Roman head is still there. And in fact, God tells us it's still there, because it's still the iron and the clay. So Rome is still there, but it is not strong like it used to be, because it's divided. It's iron and clay. It's not the same iron, rigid strength, but it's still Rome. Now, what the prophecy goes on to say is that the seventh head is going to fall, is going to disappear. I don't know exactly how, it doesn't specify, but the seventh head is going to go. And when the seventh head goes, there's no head after that. There's no head, which is one of the strange elements of the prophecy, because it says that the beast becomes the eighth, but it doesn't say he becomes the eighth head. Sometimes we read it that way, that the beast becomes head number 8, but that's not true. The beast becomes king number 8, not head number 8. He becomes the eighth the eighth kingdom, which is strange because he becomes a kingdom without a head. Let me go back to Revelation. Right. There are 7 kings, 7 kingdoms. 5 have fallen, 1 is on, the other is not yet come. He must continue a short space. And the beast that was and is not, even he is the 8th. So the beast is king number 8, but he's not head number 8. And that's a mystery, right? That's a mystery. How do you have a kingdom without a head? And so what we have is Egypt, Assyria, Babylon, Medo-Persia, Greece, Rome, and Rome in its divided form, which lasts for a short space, and then all the heads are gone. What we have left is the beast in his true state. Now there's no longer a head to mask Satan's true identity and his true ambitions. Now he appears in his true nature. And I don't know what kind of kingdom this is going to be, but I'm going to suggest something. It's a kingdom without a head. The way in which it is manifesting itself is through the 10 horns, right? 10 horns exist on this beast, but whenever I try to draw this picture, I always make sure that I put the horns not on the heads, but on the beast. Because the 10 horns receive no kingdom until after the 7th head is gone. Then the 10 horns receive power 1 hour with the beast. See, it says in verse 12, and the 10 horns which thou sawest are 10 kings, which have received no kingdom as yet, but receive power as kings 1 hour with the beast. So when the beast becomes the 8th head, when he receives his kingdom, that is after the 7 heads are gone, then the 10 kings will also receive power with the beast. So the beast is going to now reveal his power through these 10 horns, but not through another head. And in a way, these 10 horns and the beast are going to be the final manifestation of Rome. Because remember, Rome continues unto the coming of Jesus Christ. So the last 3 heads, not the last 3 heads, the last 2 heads, plus the beast as king number 8, they will all be a different aspect of Rome. Rome was king number 7. You see, king number 6 receives a deadly wound, is resurrected as kingdom number 7 in the European Union, is overthrown, is gone. Finally, however it is gone, whether it just breaks up or not. The beast appears as king number 8, and now he has 10 kingdoms from Europe that he works through, and they receive power in this last moment of time when the beast becomes king number 8. Now that's what I see. But the Bible tells us some things about this beast that we need to also bear in mind. It says that when the beast reappears as king number 8, he comes from the bottomless pit. It's important to remember this. So the beast, originally Satan calls the beast out of the sea. All right, he comes up out of the sea. In other words, he arises in a place that is heavily populated, because we are told that water represents peoples and multitudes. It's right here in Revelation 17 and verse 15. And he said unto me, the waters which thou sawest, where the whore sitteth, are peoples, multitudes, nations, and tongues. So the beast comes out of water. In other words, when this beast kingdom began, Satan started the beast in an area of the world where there were multitudes of people, which represents Europe as it was at that time. That's where the beast came from. And so I will say that this beast is a uniquely European beast. That's very important to remember. There are some people who, in trying to interpret this prophecy, they say the 10 horns on the beast represent, they say the world is divided into 10 zones, 10 areas. The one world people have divided the world into 10 zones. You have Australia, you have America, you have South America, and they name these zones, right? And they say these represent the 10 horns of the beast. But I reject that interpretation. Why? Because the beast is a European beast. It's an old world beast. It's not a global beast. It's an important point because all the heads of the beast came from the old world. Europe, North Africa, and the Middle East. That's the arena of the world that belongs to that beast. What about the rest of the world? The rest of the world has the second beast, the false prophet. America comes from the other side of the world. And America is not a part of the first beast. Remember, the second beast comes from the earth. The first one comes from the sea. America comes from the earth. America is not a part of the first beast. It's neither the horns of that beast, nor does it represent any part of that, any part of that side of the world. So God identifies America as coming out of the earth to make us know it's a different area of the world. So this beast with the 7 heads and the 10 horns and king number 8 is an old world power. We're talking about a power from that side of the world, from Europe. So this beast comes up as the 8th king. And when he comes as the 8th king, the Bible says he comes out of the bottomless pit. Now, the bottomless pit is an interesting statement. And I know I'm talking a lot. I'm going to say what I have to say about the bottomless pit, and then I'm going to pause because I don't want to leave anybody with questions in your mind if there are gaps in what I'm saying. So I'm going to pause after I talk about the bottomless pit so that if there are any questions or brief comments, we can take them. All right, the bottomless pit. Now, Revelation is a book of symbols, absolutely. And so when we see a bottomless pit in Revelation, we are not to be silly enough to think that it means a place that literally has no bottom. But in fact, I understand that the Greek word is abyssos, and it literally means the abyss. And it may give a little better idea than the word bottomless pit. But I'm going to run with the bottomless pit just to give you an idea of what I have in mind. Whether it's the abyss or the bottomless pit, the idea here is of a place where there is no hope. That's the main idea I'm going to impute to this phrase. It's a place of such spiritual darkness that there is no hope. This bottomless pit or this abyss arises 4 times in the book of Revelation. The first place is Revelation 9, where it says that the angel of the bottomless pit, he opens the pit and there comes locusts upon the earth. There comes a smoke with locusts and they torment the people on earth for 5 months. Here we are told that there is an angel of the bottomless pit. And I think his name is Abaddon, and it's Apollyon the destroyer. It's clearly something satanic. Then in Revelation 11, it speaks about the same beast that we are looking at, and it says, when God's 2 witnesses finish their testimony, the beast from the bottomless pit will make war against them and kill them. And I believe that prophecy is closely linked to the one we are looking at here in Revelation 17. This prophecy in Revelation 17 is a 3rd place where it mentions the bottomless pit. It says that the beast will come out of the bottomless pit and will go into perdition. I think it's in verse 8. The beast that thou sawest was and is not, and shall ascend out of the bottomless pit and go into perdition. And the 4th place where it mentions the bottomless pit is Revelation 20, where it says that an angel from heaven binds Satan and throws him into the bottomless pit. So when I look at all these places, what I conclude, this is my conclusion, that the bottomless pit represents not a place, but a condition. Not a place, but a condition. And what condition does it represent? It represents a condition where the Spirit of God no longer has any place. God is no longer working in this place. Please understand that if you ever get thrown into a bottomless pit, you have no hope. Because even if somebody is to save you, they have to go and fetch you. And if you fall into a bottomless pit, you will never stop falling. So a spiritual bottomless pit is a condition where there is no hope. And in my understanding, it refers to a time when the Spirit of God is no longer working on planet Earth. So the beast from the bottomless pit kills the two witnesses. Notice when? In Revelation 11. All right, maybe I should just look at that. I'm referring to things and we need to go and look at it. It says of the two witnesses in verse 7. And when they shall have finished their testimony, the beast that ascended from the bottomless pit, the same one. This is after the 7 heads are gone and the beast comes out of the bottomless pit. He shall make war against them and shall overcome them and kill them. So this means that God's word will have no more place on earth. It will have no more effect on earth. And when is it that God's word has no more effect on earth? It is when the Spirit of God is withdrawn from planet Earth. It is then that earth is without any hope. And that is when this beast comes from the bottomless pit. So he shall make war against the two witnesses. So the beast from the bottomless pit, I believe that that phrase, the bottomless pit, is a code that means simply that the Spirit of God has left humanity. So this beast, when the beast comes back, when the 7th head goes, and the beast comes back, he comes from the bottomless pit with the 10 horns. It is a kingdom, it's an empire that is completely satanic. Mark that. Every one of the heads of the beast, although they have been dominated by the woman and they have been pagan, the Spirit of God has been at work on earth. Even Nebuchadnezzar was converted. God was working with him. He was working with Darius. All of these ages, God was working, even in the time of the Roman Caesars. But when the beast comes back as king number 8, it's darkness of the greatest degree that the world has ever seen. So he's said to be the beast from the bottomless pit. So we ask the question, what kind of power is this? I believe it is a power that is completely atheistic. Now, I think my conclusion is justified because if you look at Europe today, it is the most atheistic continent on the planet, and it is becoming more and more atheistic. The knowledge of God is being driven out of Europe. I just watched a little video on YouTube where they are showing you that the churches in Europe are being made into game houses and they're selling the churches because there's nobody to worship in them. The great cathedrals are empty. Sweden is about something like 85% atheist. England is more than 50%. Germany, these countries, the knowledge of God is leaving Europe. If they are turning to anything spiritual, it's paganism. And I believe that this will completely take over Europe. And when the 7th head, when finally the European Union breaks apart, what emerges will be a kingdom that is completely godless. Now, it will not only be completely godless, it will make war on everything that has to do with God. And I believe this will include Islam, Roman Catholic Church, Protestantism, and the people of God. That is why the 10 horns are going to turn against the woman, eat her flesh, make her naked, and burn her with fire. They are going to rape the Church of Rome. They're going to take away all her cathedrals. They're going to take away all her money. They're going to take away all her authority, her everything. This secular power, this godless power is going to attack Rome and rape her and make her naked and eat her flesh and burn her with fire. And they will do the same for all the denominations that have constituted Babylon. They're going to lose everything because the world is going to go completely bottomless pit. What is ahead of us is frightening because they will be not only against organized religion, they'll be against all Christianity, maybe all religion. So we Christians, we who truly serve God, we will survive by a miracle. It's only because the elect shall be saved why we will be saved. It's only because God is with us why we will escape. So this is what I see. And we have not yet touched on the second beast, or the United States of America. But maybe it's a good place to stop, rest my voice a little, and see if there are any questions or any comments.
Question.
Of course.
What?
And when you answer, you want to
Go ahead,
Mommy is
Nikki.
unmuted. Can you stop talking? Uncle Bill,
Yes.
the what was his name? The prophet, the false prophet. Yeah, the false prophet. Is the false prophet the little horn that uprooted the other three horns, or that something different? Mommy,
Yeah,
shush.
that's a completely different prophecy. That's a prophecy in Daniel 7. The thing about it is that Daniel 7 gives us the same message, but from a different angle. So many of the elements you find in Revelation are not there in Daniel. So it's tricky to try to tie both prophecies together.
Okay, I just wanted to know because that
Yeah.
little horn is stuck in my head. But
Yeah.
so who is the false prophet?
Well, that's what I said we'll look at next. But the false prophet, simply put, is the United States of America. Simply put.
Oh, the false prophet is the second beast.
Absolutely. You
Okay.
probably got here late.
I want this question too.
All right. Let somebody else ask, and then I come back to you. All right.
Hello?
Yes. I heard somebody say hello. Is there another question?
I had a question.
Hold on, Nadisha. Let me mute everybody, and then you unmute yourself and ask your question, okay? Go ahead, Nadisha. Unmute yourself first.
So my question was, I was wondering, Daniel, is it that well in Daniel where it speaks about the beast, and we see the image of, not the beast, sorry, the image of the image, yeah, the image with the feet of iron and of clay. One of the things I wondered was, why does the image end with iron and clay, versus in Revelation where it's, it has the beast and it has all these seven, it passes Rome basically and goes on. Why does it show like basically that the end of the world, the the stone that was cut without hands hits the whole image and then gets rid of the image, but the last in Daniel, the last kingdom that we see is the one of iron and of clay.
Right. I tried to comment on it, but let me say a little more in a little more detail. It's different when you're looking at a brief picture than when you go into details. What God shows us is iron morphing into iron and clay. But we still understand that there are four kingdoms, with the last one divided in its final days. Now, what does this division look like? If you look at Daniel, you only see 2 feet of iron and clay. But when you go to Revelation, God breaks down that picture and he goes into depths in explaining the nature of that divided room. He shows us a seventh head in a time when it says that they don't cleave together. But there's some kind of cleaving, because there's something that makes us know they're trying to cleave together. But he says it won't last. And then you have the final moment when you have the same kingdom, but in such a form that the spiritual nature of it has changed. But essentially, in its structure, it is still Rome. But the spiritual nature has changed so that it's now completely godless, completely satanic. But it's still the same basic political entity, is what we're saying, is what God is saying to us. So you have to look at each prophecy and try to ask, what point is he making in this prophecy? Because they're not contradictory. It's just that one is more detailed and the perspective is a little different. Does that make sense?
Brother David.
Yes, yes, I'll accept that.
All right, nice.
It
Very
also
good.
I
said,
remember
in it
another
shall be the
question.
strength of iron and the weakness of clay. In it, referring to the kingdom, shall be the strength of iron and the weakness of clay.
Right, right. So the
Right. So
strength of
the
iron.
strength. Sorry, could you repeat that, Brother Howard? I didn't hear that.
I was saying Daniel 2 mentions that in that kingdom, in the divided kingdom, shall be the strength of iron, referring to Rome, but it also shall have the weakness of clay, which represents the division.
So Rome is there. It does not go. It just becomes watered down. If you could, are clayed down, if you want to put it that way.
Less
So,
dominant.
so basically, the last kingdoms that will come about are basically evolutions of Rome, basically the original Rome that was in the feet of iron and clay.
Absolutely, absolutely. Once we get this, we can harmonize Daniel with Revelation. Once we understand this, because in Revelation it seems like this beast, this number 8, the king number 8, it seems like it's a massive, great power, but it's in the context of the prophecy, in the context of the damage it will do. Yes, it is, but it's still just an extension of that last kingdom, which is now working in a modified way, but it's the same kingdom.
Okay.
Peter, I don't know if you could just mention what it says in chapter 17 about the beast from the bottomless pit would be the 8th and is off the 7.
Right. Okay. Thanks, Howard. Yeah, we never emphasized that point, but it says it is the 8th king, but is of the 7 heads. In other words, we commented on it, but we never applied it to that verse. It just simply means that the beast has been a part of all 7 heads. All 7 heads have been a part of the beast. When he appears as king number 8, the heads are gone, but he now appears in his true identity, he who once had been disguised by those 7 heads. All right, is there anybody else apart from Nikki who has a question?
Yes, I have a question. Brother David, do the 10 toes in Daniel have a specific connection to the 10 horns? I believe they do. Is that what you believe as well?
Okay, could I just ask who this is?
Oh, this is Matthew, Matt Namey.
Oh, hi, Matt.
Hey.
Your picture froze. I didn't recognize that you were talking.
Okay.
The thing is, I believe so by default, but I'll just make a comment. Daniel 2 does not refer 10 toes, does not mention 10 toes. So we're kind of making an assumption because we know that most people have 10 toes, but
Yeah.
it doesn't mention 10 toes. So we're kind of assuming here, and so we're trying to make a connection and say, well, those 10 toes could correspond to those 10 kings, but it's an assumption.
Okay, and just 2 more things. The next thing is the abyss. Now, there's also the mention of the word abyss in Genesis. The earth was without form and void. It's the same word, right?
Yes. Darkness was upon the face of the abyss.
Right. And so is that just the Hebrew word for that Greek word in Revelation that describes the earth as being maybe just a dark and dismal place? You know, as you said, it was the most, secular or satanic place, but is there a connection there? I thought that there was.
I would look at it this way. Genesis is describing a physical place. Revelation is describing a spiritual condition. So even though it's the same word, like the same word is used for Babylon, or the same word is used for beast, but when you come to Revelation, you have to look at the spiritual interpretation. Now, I believe that physical darkness is to Genesis as spiritual darkness is to Revelation.
Okay.
So we get the same word and we get the same impression. Genesis says that abyss means dark, dismal, without light. So when I come to Revelation, I take the same meaning and I apply it in a spiritual sense. And that's how I would see a connection there.
And the last thing is it was funny because I was thinking about asking you this question last week, or in the middle of this week rather. Today I was going to ask you about the king of the north, and then you happen to mention that you haven't spent enough time on that. But so you're saying that you don't accept Daniel Revelation's, Uriah Smith's Daniel Revelation's interpretation for the king of the north being the physical, the person in power at that time, where he says that, when it was, so now it's Turkey, because Turkey possesses that land.
Um, I've read Uriah Smith. I've looked at James White's variation. I've seen Robert Brinsmead's idea. I've seen the people who are saying it's Islam versus the papacy, and everything has some kind of appeal. But in my own mind, none of them have fulfilled some of the specifications. So I'm kind of like in limbo. Honestly, I wouldn't say I'm not in agreement with any of them, but I would say that I'm not in agreement with any of them, because I just have too many questions when I look at all those interpretations. I kind of think that when you find the right thing, when you have the right answer, everything will go click, click, click. And it's not doing this when I look at those interpretations. So I'm not satisfied, is what I would say, Matt.
Okay, I appreciate that. Thank you.
You're welcome, Matt. Yes, Nikki.
Hello, Brother David.
All right.
I just wanted to
Hello.
ask if the close of probation is when the demon is coming out of the bottomless pit.
Yes, it mentions the demons are the locust-like creatures in Revelation 9, and that I believe is after the close of probation. It's during the time of the trumpets. And as I said, maybe it was Friday night, I mentioned that I believe that the trumpets and the plagues correspond to the same period in the same time period. So the short answer is yes, I believe so. All right. Somebody was in the background speaking, but the voice is very low.
Brother David.
Yes.
Hello.
I can hardly hear you.
Who's able to speak? Can I ask a question?
Can
Brother
you?
David.
Yes. Who is that?
Diane?
No, not you, Diane. There's somebody else. Somebody, is that Brother Bacon?
Yeah, Brother Beckham, that's
Brother
it.
David.
Yes, Brother Bacon. You're apparently not hearing me. I'm saying go ahead.
Okay. I was thinking about the woman riding the beast. If we go back to Genesis chapter 47, where Joseph was selling the land, buying the land of Egypt, you see that he did not. The only land that he did not buy for Pharaoh was the land of the priest, just to make an action, as in the word about the woman riding the beast. The manifestation of this woman has always been there ever since Egypt. So it is clear when I look at it, I said it is wonderful, because I've never thought of it as to be so clear about the woman riding the beast. The only land that he could not buy was the land of the priest, the Egyptian priest. It's just a comment that I wanted. I saw that it was so wonderful when I was reading over it.
Thank you, Brother Bacon. Yeah, and that's a good point. He's pointing out, if you were not able to hear that, in Genesis it tells you that when Joseph was getting the land of the Egyptians, because they had no food, they had to give him everything. The only people who were exempted was the priests. And the same thing in Babylon. I mean, it was the priests who were continually the Babylonian priests who were continually pushing the kings to oppress Daniel and to cause him to make laws that would put Daniel in the lion's den and so on. So it was so in all ages. So thank you, Brother Bacon. Sister Diane, you were saying something.
With the one that comes out of the bottomless pits, not pit, no longer having the kings or the horns represent as front men, would that be the devil himself? And they actually worship him for a while? Is that the Antichrist? Who is this?
I believe it is a devil, but I don't think it's a devil openly. And the reason why is because a beast is not used to represent an individual. I mean, God has a symbol already for Satan, which is the dragon or the serpent. So I would
Right.
think it's inconsistent for him to just switch to another symbol and suddenly make Satan into the beast. So I believe it's Satan, and I believe it's entirely satanic in a different kind of way, but I don't think it's Satan himself for those reasons.
So would it be what, the Antichrist? No?
Maybe the Antichrist will be at the head of that kingdom, maybe. But the beast itself is a kingdom. I think we hold that to be consistent. We hold that interpretation. The beast continues to be a kingdom, but it's a
Without
kingdom. It's a kingdom of a different nature. It's something like the world has never seen before. It's a kingdom without a head, but it's also a kingdom that is absolutely entirely. Maybe it's more than godless, because I suppose we have had communist governments like in Russia and other places that have been, like North Korea. Maybe North Korea, what we hear about it, maybe a little similar to what we see coming, but it's even more than that. It's almost like it may be openly satanic. It's interesting because if any of you have ever seen the opening of the tunnel in Switzerland, if you go on YouTube and look for the opening of the tunnel, they made a 17-mile long tunnel in Europe, in Switzerland, which is the longest tunnel in the world. But when they were opening this tunnel, if you go on YouTube and look for the opening ceremony, it is an openly devilish ceremony. I've never seen anything like it in my life, where you have all the heads of Europe gathered together, and there is a ceremony that can best be described as Satan worship. So you won't understand unless you look at it. But I look at it and I wonder, what on earth is going on here? They have people dressed up like spirits, right? They have a ceremony where some people fall down and die, and you have spirits rising up, and you have people dressed up like Satan. And I'm wondering, what is this that the heads of Europe come together to celebrate the opening of this tunnel? And I don't understand it, but it represents the trend of Europe, the trend that is developing there. And I can well imagine that when the satanic kingdom arises, it may be something more in that order, not just straight atheistic, but openly satanic. I'm thinking, okay, but I could be wrong, but that's what I'm thinking. All right, now I will confess that my voice is getting tired and I need to rest. So I don't think I'm going to continue with the study further this evening. I'm going to leave the discussion on the second beast, the two-horned beast, the false prophet. I'm going to deal with that next week, and if I forget, you can remind me. But I am still
Go ahead and close the recording.
Come again, Howard?
Stop the recording.
All right, but I'm still going to be open for any further questions or comments. If I don't have to speak continually, I think I'll be all right. Okay, but I'm just saying that the study itself, I'm going to halt here. So we're still involved in questions and comments if we have any. All right, let me just stop the recording at this point.